Okay, so today we're going to talk about personality psychology. Personality psychology is a very interesting field, um, and let's just dive right in. So, what is personality? I think there's a lot of common definitions for personality, who you are, what you're like, how do you know someone? Do you know their personality? Is that how you get to know someone? Personality comes from Latin word persona, which actually means mask. Ooh, what you present to the world, right? Formally, personality could be described as the distinct patterns of behavior, thoughts, and feelings that characterize a person's adaptation to life. Informally, really the unique behavioral qualities and characteristics that make you who you are. Personality is pretty complex, and measurement of it has to be complex for that reason, right? We're all unique individuals, and so in order to measure that, it's pretty complicated. So we're going to talk more about that. So personality is what distinguishes us from one another, like I said, makes us unique. It's also important to note that personality is relatively enduring and consistent. So that means that your personality doesn't really change all that much over time, and it's relatively consistent across settings. And we'll kind of delve into that in a second. So when we talk about personality, those personality characteristics we call traits. So a personality trait is a disposition to behave consistently in a particular way. It's really the part of personality. So that small breakdown of what your personality is, you can break it down into traits. Okay, and we're going to go in more depth with different traits and what those are as we talk today. So, nature and nurture of personality. So remember that nature and nurture is that big question of whether or not things in our lives, our personality, our intelligence, those kinds of things, come from our genetics, or do they come from our life experiences, how we were raised, etc. Okay? And so we know that, or we hypothesize, I should say, that human personality is the result of evolution to adapt to life. Okay, so we evolved these traits as an adaptive behavior response to fundamental issues of survival and reproduction. So this evolutionary theory suggests that our naturally selected traits are favored if they increase our chances of survival and reproductive success. So we have greater survival and reproductive success because of our personality, and therefore our offspring are more likely, or the offspring further down the line, are more likely to have the traits that we have if we're able to successfully reproduce. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, there are large-scale research studies into trying to figure out how much of the variability, so how much of the differences among all of our personalities are related to, or sort of are because of, both genetics and experiences. So these data that I'm about to show you are from a large-scale meta-analysis. So 40% of you believe that a trait being heritable means you cannot change it. That's not true. Just because a trait is heritable doesn't mean you cannot change it. So each of these breakdowns shows you for a couple of or 5 different personality traits how heritable versus environmental the variability is. Okay, so let's start with something easy. Extroversion. Most of you guys can probably understand what extroversion is versus introversion. So someone who's more outgoing, social, gets energy from being around people. Extroversion is about 48% genetic. So almost half. And you'll see that most of these are around half, agreeableness being the most related to environmental influence. So you can see here that they have for environment, shared environment and non-shared environment. That's because usually research examining the relative contributions of genetics and the environment is done on twins. And so twins, right, identical twins specifically, have the exact same genes, but they have sometimes they have different environments. Okay, so the shared environment is maybe the house that you grew up in with your sibling. A non-shared environment is you're in a different class than them. Okay, so some of these estimates are better than others. Again, they're just estimates based on the data that we can gather. So you can see that each of them, about 50% really of your personality is the result of your genes. And then the other 50% is the result of environmental influences. So just because a trait is heritable, just because you get some of your personality from your parents, does not mean that it's not changed, doesn't mean that it's not unique to you, because half of the variance, half of the differences for you come from environmental factors, okay, and choices that the individual makes. We know, super interestingly, that we already have precursors to our adult personalities as early as in utero, okay? So we can actually track temperament and personality differences before birth using fetal activity and heart rate. So that fetal activity and heart rate, once it goes outside the norms, or really wherever it is predictive of temperament in the first year of life. So temperament is a precursor, an elementary precursor to personality, and we know that temperament does predict personality later on in life. So we know that there are individual differences that are already existing before you're even born. Super cool. Also, maternal stress during pregnancy can affect the infant's stress response style, which we already have talked about a little bit when we talked about development. We discussed how teratogenic effects can influence the baby later in life developmentally. Okay? And I'm going to stop there.